Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Trail Mix, where the nuts might be a little stale, but the company is always fresh.
Greg Crawford here, retired journalist working for nothing but the truth and Social Security checks. We're in Brussels today, watching NATO. NATO's meeting with Secretary of Defense, War, whatever we call it now, Hegseth, for more talks about U.S. getting paid for Tomahawk missiles, more talks. It just seems to be talks. We're going to get more talks between Trump and Zelensky on Friday. My take for all along has been that Trump's not going to do a damn thing for Ukraine in the end. He's going to let Putin do whatever he wants. And but in the meantime, he's going to act like he's doing something. And today's the big day for that bit of theater. So here we're going to listen to some of the reports from Brussels on the meeting between NATO leaders and Hegseth just now, and we got a press conference coming up, so we're going to find out if anything's changing about U.S. support. We're even back off on sanctions against Russia. We'll see if anything's changing in terms of U.S. getting behind Ukraine. We've seen a 43% drop in the U.S. assistance to Ukraine since Trump took office, and none of that seems to be changing, but we're going to watch a little bit of this today and see if we can see any hints that anything is going to change on that front. So here's a report from this is actually TV Poland, which is a very good one to monitor there in English language on the goings-ons in Europe, especially what's happening with Russia.
The Belgian capital. Good afternoon, Angela. Now tell us, what weapons are being pushed for at this meeting or at the current moment?
Yes, so we know that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has already used 2 billion euros as part of Pearl. That is the prioritized Ukraine requirements list to buy interceptors for Patriot air defense missile systems, as well as ammunition for those long-range rocket systems. So this is some of the weaponry that Ukraine has already used as part of Pearl. This is a scheme cooked up by US President Donald Trump in which NATO alliance members donate funds to the United States, the US then using that money to send weapons to Ukraine. The need for more weaponry for the war-torn country comes as the Kiel Institute on Tuesday released a report which stated that military aid for Ukraine fell 43% from the months of July to August. That is despite this initiative, which aims to bring more military aid for Ukraine. It really highlights the need for more cash required. This is exactly what the US Secretary for Defense Pete Hegseth and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said earlier this morning.
And there is now much more cash on the table. There is firepower coming out of our defense industry, which is so important. And we are doing everything collectively to keep Ukraine strong. But I particularly want to thank President Trump and you personally for your leadership and the whole team for the fact that NATO is now much stronger, more lethal.
Firepower, that's what is coming, we expect and is coming from NATO. And it was a historic summit just a couple of months ago, brought about by leadership of President Trump to say we need our allies to step up. And they did, and they have in those commitments. Now those commitments will soon translate into capabilities, which is the most important aspect of it. And one part of that, of course, is Pearl, is the initiative where European countries buy U.S. weapons transferred to NATO for the fight in Ukraine to bring peace to that conflict.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth speaking there at NATO for the need for those NATO military alliance to step in, provide the cash to the United States so they can send those weapons to Ukraine. We heard earlier this morning that countries such as Sweden, Estonia and Finland promising, pledging more support. But there are countries within the European Union, heavy hitters such as Italy, Spain and France, that have received backlash for not making any fresh pledges today. We need to understand whether others will materialise through the course of the day and if they're going to hit that $3.5 billion deficit outlined by the Ukrainian president earlier, stating this is what is required until October to continue fighting against Russian aggression. But there's going to be a press conference in 10 minutes delivered by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, where we're hoping for more good news for those soldiers there in Ukraine.
Angela Skujins reporting from NATO headquarters there in the Belgian capital. Thank you very much. Speaking from the Oval Office on Tuesday evening, Donald Trump said he's, quote, very disappointed with Russian President Vladimir
Disappointed.
Putin. The U.S. president
He's been saying that
Putin
since he
should
took
have
office.
won the war in Ukraine within the first week. But
That's
instead,
all he
the
says.
conflict has dragged
Disappointed.
on for nearly 4 years.
I'm very disappointed because Vladimir and I had a very good relationship, probably still do. I don't know why he continues with this war. This war has been so bad for him. He's going into 4 years of a war that he should have won that war in 1 week. He's now going to soon be into his 4th year. He's got to really settle this war. And you know, they have long lines waiting for gasoline in Russia right now, right? They have long lines. Who thought that was going to happen? And all of a sudden his economy is going to collapse. And I'd like to see him do well. I mean, I had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, but he just doesn't want to end that war.
The battle for energy in Ukraine rages on, with Kyiv's forces hitting oil depots in occupied Crimea and Russian forces striking heating and gas infrastructure, causing rolling blackouts across the country. For more on this, let's go live to Ukraine and our correspondent Alex Cadier. Good afternoon, Alex. So what's the situation like on the ground? I imagine you're hearing lots of generators echo through the streets. And, what impacts have these strikes had there in occupied Crimea?
Yeah, good afternoon, Don. You're right. And we just heard from President Trump. He said Vladimir Putin does not want to end this war. And the evidence is plain to see here on the ground in Ukraine. We've had rolling blackouts in Kyiv just yesterday because of an overload to the energy system and because of residual damage to those energy infrastructure, civilian energy infrastructure, following a wave of Russian strikes. We know that strikes on the 3rd and 5th of October knocked out 60% of Ukraine's gas production. And as part of those repairs, that gas, of course, used in part for heating buildings.
Can you imagine
as
getting
well.
stuck in
And
those
ongoing
high-rises in
repairs
Kiev,
means that the energy
not
systems,
knowing
the
if
energy
you can use the
infrastructure
elevator?
have to be
If
re-regulated.
the power
hence those
goes out,
rolling
you're stuck
blackouts.
there
What does
for
that mean,
hours.
in
Imagine
Kiev and
that.
other cities? It means
Having
that
to
your
live like that for
power
the
will be
last
coming
3
on and
years.
off in your building. Nothing will be working for electricity. Your heating may drop out. The pumps used for water supply, public water supply, may also be turned off briefly, which means water pressure, if not water access, may be cut off. If you're taking the lift to go down from your building and a power cut strikes in the middle of that, you will be stuck there possibly for hours if you can't be rescued. That has become routine, not just this winter, but it has been the case in previous winters within Ukraine. We've seen more strikes over the last few days on the gas infrastructure of this country, affecting the power grids as well. 30,000 people in Kharkiv in the last few days without power. Those repairs, of course, ongoing. Big questions about Ukrainian air defenses being stretched thin by these Russian attacks. 74% effective, as General Syrsky, the top military commander in Ukraine, described them. But nevertheless, this will remain a challenge. That's not to say that Ukraine isn't hitting back. The largest oil depot in occupied Crimea still on fire 24 hours after Ukrainian drones struck those oil reserves. Of course, a very difficult fire to control. Also very difficult to get accurate information from the ground because that information flow so tightly controlled by the Russian authorities. Hence that description, Don, as you called it, as the battle for energy. The Russians hoping to freeze out Ukrainian people throughout the winter. Ukrainians still fighting back.
Yes, indeed. And, well, we haven't even made it to winter yet. Alex Cadier reporting from Kyiv. Thank you for that. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stripped Odessa Mayor Hennady Trukhanov of his Ukrainian citizenship and removed him from office. The now former mayor has held a Russian passport since before the war and has faced many accusations of corruption. The port city.
You know, that's a story that's ongoing in Ukraine that we don't see a lot over here, that gets covered quite a bit in Europe. Is Zelensky has a lot of spies and traitors from Russia active inside Ukraine. Lucky for him, he's got the power to deny citizenship of anyone for just about any reason he likes, although he's been pretty legitimate in his use of that power. But he can throw anybody out, and he just threw out one of these mayors or something. We're gonna stick with this because the NATO Secretary General is coming up pretty soon.
Odessa will now be placed under a military.
See if we get him on the stage. Sure. Well, here's a little more on
Never
this.
been more political or more unpredictable.
While in the Serbian capital, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that Serbia will soon be connected to the EU's energy market. She also added...
Yeah, that's another thing. Old Putin's trying to peel Serbia away from us. Here's the Secretary General. He just met with Hegseth, and they've been talking about Tomahawk missiles, which are long-range missiles that Ukraine could use to go as far as Moscow. And he wants those badly. NATO wants him to get them. So NATO's talking to Trump about some sort of scheme that Trump came up with where they give us the money, we send them to Europe, they send them to Ukraine. I don't know. Whatever the scheme is, it's not happened yet, and it's been talked about for weeks. So that's kind of what's on the table right now.
In Yelchin's new facility.
Giving Rafago a
NATO defense ministers. And this was the first meeting since the summit in The Hague.
They just got out of this meeting he's talking about, and Hegseth is over there.
As well as our capacity and resolve to address them. Last month, NATO met drones and jets violating our airspace with quick and decisive action that ensured the security of Allied territory. These incidents highlighted the effectiveness of our deterrence and defense posture, while also providing impetus to improve it further. Under the initiative of NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe, we have stepped up our vigilance and enhanced our posture in the Baltic Sea. We recently launched Eastern Sentry, which adds strength and flexibility to our posture across and along the eastern flank, or wherever needed, whenever needed. I think it is truly impressive to see the speed and determination with which allies have made additional military resources available, and I want to thank them for that. And today we have agreed to further step up, building our capacity to act on the commitments made in The Hague to invest more in defense. Defense ministers discussed the plan underway as allies chart a credible path to sustainability in terms of the increased investments in defense. We also discussed our deterrence and defense posture and some of the ways in which we are innovating to deal with new and novel challenges, including those posed by drones. As a result, NATO will implement a number of additional counter-drone measures that will build on and expand and accelerate
Not hearing anything new
to counter drones. Earlier this month, 9 allies came together.
There was some hope this meeting he's talking about they just had with
to counter potential drone
other European leaders would
I
lead
think
to
this is a
some
powerful
concrete
example
announcements about,
and effective cooperation that is
in
made
particular,
possible
Tomahawk
through
missiles
NATO.
to Ukraine, but we're not
We will
hearing
build
it
on
so
this
far.
model as we
Maybe
respond
we'll
to hybrid
hear it
threats,
in his
including
answers
from
to
drones,
questions.
and continue to develop our mechanisms for allies to share their capabilities and expertise in times of need. As we speak, in the context of Eastern Sentry, we are testing integrated systems that will help us detect, track, and neutralize aerial threats. Innovation and adaptation are in this alliance's DNA. In this vein, we will continue to learn from and cooperate with Ukraine, speed up our own innovation, deepen cooperation with the private sector, and more. Through rigorous and iterative cycles of tests, trials and exercises, we will bring new technologies and capabilities to bear. We will use our procurement mechanisms to support allies to develop and quickly source cost-effective capabilities. And we will continue to work closely with the EU, building on our unique strength as we support the security of our skies in concert with both military and civilian stakeholders. And all of this will build on our experience and expertise and contribute to our collective defense. NATO is a defensive alliance. We will remain a defensive alliance, but make no mistake. This defensive alliance is ready and willing to do what it takes to keep our 1 billion people safe and our territory secure. Today, ministers reaffirmed that we are increasing investment in defense, enhancing defense production and stepping up our support to Ukraine. Our military has the tools and the authorities required to do the job. And we continue to train and to adapt as needed. We don't engage in tit-for-tat exchanges, but we can and do take necessary steps to defend
That's the
and
way of
protect
saying
our own.
they
To
didn't
increase
respond
costs
in
to
kind
those
to
who
Russian
might test us.
incursions on NATO
And to make clear to
airspace
any potential
by
adversary
invading
that
Russian
our
airspace.
resolve
That's
is
what they call
unshaken.
tit for tat. They're not doing that yet. I don't
As
know
we
why not,
continue to
really.
ensure our own defense, we continue to support Ukraine. Their security is linked with ours. This is not just words, but is reflected in the support we give to Ukraine. Thanks to funding from allies, we are providing Ukraine with critical US equipment through the Prioritized Ukraine Requirement List, or PEARL. It is getting Ukraine the US weapons it really needs to protect its people and to hold the front line. We started off even strong with 6 allies funding the first PEARL packages. And today, we heard from ally after ally about new contributions. More than half of NATO allies have now signed up, securing this crucial flow of support for Ukraine. This and other direct military support for Ukraine is so vital to our security that it counts toward NATO's defense spending target. This support will continue. Defense Minister Schmierhal joins us for a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council today, as did EU High Representative Kaja Kallas. And later this afternoon, there will be a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. We all support the effort led by the United States to bring an end to the war against Ukraine and secure a just and lasting peace. But day after day, night after night, Russia continues to strike Ukraine, targeting its people and civilian infrastructure, including its energy networks, as winter approaches, leaving people without heat, light and water. Our support for Ukraine is crucial, and it will continue unabated. Thank you for your attention. Of course, I'm ready to take your questions.
Let's start in the center, third row, BBC.
BBC.
The mic is coming.
This feed's coming from TV Poland, TV World.
Can I just first of all ask you, but I'm a bit confused about the drone initiative, because the EU is discussing its own drone defence initiative, what some people are calling a drone wall. How is it different what you're doing, and isn't there a danger this is duplication? And my second question is about a hypothetical, which is, we know Donald Trump is meeting President Zelensky in the White House Friday at the end of the week. We know that there's been discussions about Tomahawk cruise missiles. Now, it's not your decision.
That's the question.
But would you support
Did
the
they
US
get anywhere
supplying
today
Ukraine
in
with
this
Tomahawk
meeting
cruise
that
missiles?
just
And
ended
what message do you
on
think
getting
that
Tomahawks
would
to
send
Ukraine,
to
long-range missiles
Well,
that
on the
could go
second
as far as
question,
Moscow?
I will not go into that, because indeed it is up to individual allies, and saying it is up to individual allies, I should limit myself to the max on commenting on potential decisions by allies.
They didn't
but
get
I can
anything
assure
done.
you that we are very happy about the meeting taking place. The fact that the American President Trump and the President of Ukraine are working
I
so
don't
closely
think we're
together.
ever giving Ukraine
of course,
these
we are supporting
Tomahawks.
Ukraine
Just
wherever
going to
we
talk
can.
about it.
I myself
They've
in
been talking
constant
about it
contact
for
with
weeks.
President
They talked
Zelensky and
about it
President
today, and
Trump,
they're still talking
I
about it.
think
They're
it is
going to
very
talk
good
about it
that they have
again
that meeting on Friday, because in the end, what we need to achieve is to make sure that Putin gets to the table, that meaningful negotiations start, and that we bring this terrible war to an end. And that end has to be lasting. That is why the Europeans have come together to discuss security guarantees, together with Canada and others. That is why it is so important that the US has said we want to be supportive of those security guarantees, of course, only coming into place after a long-term ceasefire / a peace deal. On your first question, I'm so happy you asked that question, because I get it often. And there is no duplication. Let me just say it once and for all. The EU and NATO are working hand in hand, closely together. And we both know our strength. NATO's strength is in the capabilities, the military decisions, what you need basically to make sure that when it comes to anti-drone technology, we have what we have in place, what we need to have in place, learning also from the Ukrainians, learning from Pierre von Jay, our Supreme Allied Commander Transformation and his team, all the people in this building working on this, so that we can keep our skies safe. And then the EU has its own strength when it comes to what I would call the soft power of the internal market, bringing defense industry together, making sure that the money is there, and then doing it in such a way that there is maximum access to what they are doing for non-EU countries. And so I'm happy what they are doing. They are happy what we are doing. It is working in conjunction. We are in close contact, and there is no overlap. And I hope that solves that issue.
Okay, we're going to the fourth row, Wall Street Journal.
Thank you very much. Dan Michaels, Wall Street Journal. If I could follow up on that a little bit.
No, I was so clear.
It's like drone defense is, as we've seen recently, as much a homeland security issue as it is a military issue. So how is NATO coordinating with homeland security authorities in its member countries to deal with this? Thank you.
Yes, well, of course, in NATO, it is always up to individual allies to make sure that they contribute to the overall effort, what they can contribute, and to make sure that the NATO overall effort is providing the umbrella when it comes to innovation and scaling and procurement, and everything we can do in terms of speeding up the process. And that, of course, is the strength of NATO. And yes, of course, you could have lengthy debates on whether a drone coming from over the border or drones somewhere.
What we're listening for today is any sign that anything's changed.
And of course, we have those discussions. We are learning from the Ukrainians. To be honest, we are not going to tell you everything what we know or what we go to decide, but I can assure you, of course, all of this is part of the discussion.
All right, coming to the second row, the woman in the sparkly vest.
Yeah, my name is Katerina, Kyiv Post.
Hello.
Is there any information on what air defense system can be received
just seeing
by
a quote
Ukraine
here from Hegseth
and
live
to protect our
this is happening,
infrastructure, critical
saying that
infrastructure.
there's more firepower.
Yes, of course,
headed
many
to
air defense
That's what we're
systems have been
listening for
delivered to
in this
Ukraine over the last 3.5 years of
announcement
the
of
war,
any such thing, or
both
if
from
it's
Europe
just more
as well as
talk.
from the United States. Basically, what we have done now is we know what Ukraine needs to stay strong in the fight. And some of that stuff only the US can provide. For example, these interceptors for Patriot systems. So that's why we have that whole Pearl initiative where allies are buying from the US.
We just got a study, by the way, that U.S. military support for Ukraine has dropped 43%.
The military itself. And the US is providing this in a constant flow and stream of lethal, and in this case, when it comes to air defense, non-lethal support for Ukraine. And of course, also Europeans active here. We know the Italians and the French and the Germans have their own anti-missile systems, and I cannot go into all the details what they have or have not delivered to Ukraine. But probably you have heard the Ukrainian leadership talk about it in the past, so there is a fair amount of transparency, I think, there. And they are also working on making sure that they have what they need to make sure that those systems stay relevant and can do what they need to do. And it has to work in conjunction. But a lot of this has to come from the US, because it's unique, but unique military support which only the US can provide. And that's why we need that Pearl initiative. This list of what Ukraine needs, which only the US can provide, paid for by allies. And today, as I said, over half of allies now have signed up. We had 6 originally, the Dutch, the Germans, the Canadians, the Swedes, the Norwegians, and the Danes. And today, I can tell you it's over half of all allies. And you know there are 32, so there's more than 16.
Coming over here, second row, the woman in the second seat.
Hello, Cristina Popușoi, Radio Free Europe Moldovan Service. Continuing the drones topic, I'm wondering what NATO can do for its partner, Republic of Moldova, which is increasingly in this situation with a lot of threats from the Russian
old Moldova. We
drones,
remember
and
that.
the
We
country
covered
has
that live.
almost
Their
no
parliamentary
ability to
elections
respond
a few
to
weeks
these
ago,
threats. So
where
we saw
the
that
pro-European
today announcement of the
government
UK
stayed
government
in
that they
power
are
pretty
intending
handily,
to send to Moldova
despite
some experts
something
to
close to
help the
300
country to
million
fight
Putin spent
with Russian
to unseat their
drones.
members
But
in the
I'm
parliament.
wondering if there are
So
some other
Moldova's hanging
measures
in there,
discussed at NATO
barely.
level. And
Well,
also
maybe
in
a little
this
more than
context,
barely.
I
That
would
was a pretty
like
good
to
outcome
ask
for
you,
the
how do you
good
assess
guys in
the
their parliamentary
increase
election a few
of
weeks
the
ago.
Russian of the exercise of the Russian troops in the Transnistrian region, also related to these drone exercises?
Yeah, of course, this was not in-depth debated today, but I can generally assure you that there's a close cooperation between the EU and Moldova, between NATO and Moldova. Maya Sandu, myself, we know each other for many years now. I'm an admirer of her leadership. And wherever she feels that we can be of help, we try to help. And that can be NATO as a whole, it can be individual allies stepping up. But also here, let me not go into too many details, because we are a democracy. This is an open press conference. I know that Vladimir Putin always tunes in to these moments, listening to what I'm saying, so I don't want to make him too wise.
All right, we're going to come to the center here, third row, Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung. Third row.
Okay. Thanks for the question. Thomas Kutschka, Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung.
Good to see you.
My understanding is that you have presented today a plan to the allies how to strengthen defense against intruding drones. It was not so clear from your initial remarks. That's why I'm coming back to this issue.
Yeah, it was
if
not.
that is correct, could you please provide a little bit more detail of what that plan entails? For instance, would it also protect member states that are not at the eastern flank? We've seen such drone incursions in Copenhagen, in Munich, and elsewhere. And what you said about no duplication with the EU, you are always implying that the ambition of the EU is only to strengthen the defense sector and basically provide funding. But clearly we know, and we will see it from the roadmap they are going to present, that they are developing plans on their own. They've called it flagships. It entails drone wall and eastern flank watch. And these are detailed proposals that have not been developed by NATO. So are you willing to adapt them? Or are you willing to adapt them? Or are you saying, no, we are doing this planning?
On the second question, obviously, the EU is doing a lot of stuff, we're doing a lot of stuff. We will make sure that it all works to speed up each other's initiatives, making use of each other's strength. And I've been in so many of these European Union Council meetings with the EU leaders. In my previous role, the EU has an enormous capacity to bring together the relevant players, the power to make sure that if things really are necessary, that the money is there, that the industry is there. Look what happened during COVID, other moments in recent history where the EU was stepping up and making sure that its convening power, its organizing power was used to the max. And obviously, when you do that, you cannot stop at saying we have a drone problem and now we just bring the industry. Now, of course, you also have to think about what that means in technical terms. But on that side, we work completely in conjunction. So the Supreme Allied Commander is in close contact with Kaja Kallas and her team, and we are all working with Andrius Kubilius, the Defense Commissioner. So nobody in the EU and nobody in NATO, we have enough on our plates. We don't want to do anything the other is better at doing. I can really assure you. And here, of course, we are very much also helped by the fact that Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, is herself a former defense minister of Germany. So she knows her stuff, you could say. And I love working with her. And we never had issues when it comes to this division of labor. On your first question, of course, first of all, we have, let's say, the air policing as it was. And that's still there. but now we have Eastern Sentry, which, when it comes to the whole eastern flank, has the ambition
He's
to
talking
ramp
about
up
how they're
our,
going to respond to
our
Russia
defense
invading
against
NATO
any
airspace.
incursions. And as I said in my introductory
Which they've
remarks,
been doing
yes, that is the
regularly
eastern
lately.
flank, but basically whenever and whatever, when it is in the air, we have to be vigilant. And then we have, as part of Eastern Sentry, the acknowledgement that with the drones coming into Poland, where we were already working on drones, it's even basically has motivated us to do even more and faster and speedier to make sure that when it comes to these drones, we have more.
Poland shot down 17 drones in that
as
incident
the
he's
Dutch
talking about.
F-35s did in Poland, but that we also have other means which are less costly.
Well, other NATO
this is
jets
why we
too. Sweden
are
was
bringing together
involved.
these various initiatives, all under this heading of Eastern Sentry and part of Eastern Sentry. And that includes a few elements already mentioned: procurement. It brings together things like speeding up innovation, testing systems, as I mentioned.
The
we
issue
already
is whether
testing some of these systems now
NATO jets
on the
start
eastern
shooting
flank,
down drones over
and as we
western
speak.
Ukraine.
So we are really
where they're
ramping up and doing that quite
so
speedily,
active
also
and-
making
and
use of all the
threatening
knowledge
NATO
from Ukraine. We
airspace.
have JTEC, this joint center with Ukraine and NATO in Poland, where we capture all the lessons from the war. And yeah, Ukraine, of course, is I think #1 in the world now when it comes to drone technology and anti-drone technology. So we can learn from them, as they supported also Denmark when they were confronted with these drones 2 weeks ago in the run-up to these big European meetings in Copenhagen.
You know,
All right,
that's a
we're
major
very short on
change in
time, so we'll just
warfare
have time for
occurring
one or two more questions. We'll
on
come
our
to the front and
watch.
center here, the woman in the red
the
jacket.
emergence of drone warfare.
Charlie Hancock,
That is
the
where
Moscow
we're going.
Times independent Russian media in exile in the Netherlands. We know that one of the hallmarks of Russian hybrid warfare is ambiguity about who is responsible, to make attribution difficult and also give the Kremlin some plausible deniability. But we also know from whether it be in the Baltic Sea or the fact that many of the FPV drone sightings over military sites and civilian infrastructure in Western Europe either remain unattributed or they took a very long time for an investigation to be carried out. So how can NATO ensure a decisive response to deter future hybrid warfare from Russia whilst maintaining the credibility not only of its response but of its intelligence?
Well, step one is to acknowledge the fact that we are 25 times bigger than Russia. The overall NATO economy is 50 trillion to 2 trillion.
Always
for
worth
Russia. It's not bigger
remembering.
than the state of Texas, not bigger than the combined economies of the Netherlands
It's like
and Belgium.
McCain used
Of course,
to say,
with
Russia's
a
just a gas
nuclear
station
capability.
masquerading
So
as
I
a
would not
country.
compare it completely with Belgium and the Netherlands. But obviously, let's not overstate what Russia is capable of. And we know that their fighter jet pilots are famously not successful in steering these fighter jets, and their captains do not know how to lower an anchor. So, given all the stuff they create on the seabed, of course, what you're rightly saying is that it is famously
He's
difficult
talking about Russian
to assess whether something
oil
is intentional.
tankers scraping
Of course,
the
you always
bottom
should
of the
look into that.
Baltic
But
Sea
when
with
it
their
comes to the
anchors
airspace
and
incursions
destroying pipelines,
in Poland
probably on
and the
purpose.
MiG-31s in Estonia, whether it was intentional or not, it was anyway reckless. It was anyway unacceptable. And then what I want to do is to assess after this situation has ended, whether we reacted as we should react. And we did. And you know why? Because we do this over 70, 80 years already. With the Soviets, with the Russians, with Yeltsin and with Putin. Putin before 2010 and the Putin when he came back and started to radicalize even further. So we have trained and prepared for this. This is exactly what we did when this situation happened. And that means that we are not going to take down an airplane in a NATO airspace if it does not pose a threat. But if it poses a threat, I can assure you that our military people have all the authorities they need to make sure that that plane immediately does not pose a threat anymore. And then you know what I mean.
question
And
is,
I think
yeah,
that is
what do you
important.
say?
And
Are
the
they
Russians
gonna
know
shoot
this.
them down,
So I would say let's
over
trust
Ukrainian
our military.
airspace
They
if
have
they
the
have
best
to,
stuff.
if they're
They're very
threatening
well trained.
NATO airspace.
We've
That's
done this
where
for
we
over
are.
50, 60,
That's
70
where
years.
this
We know
thing
how to do this. And let's not take the
takes a
Russians too
turn.
seriously.
If
Then your
NATO
question
jets
could be, but
start
then why do
shooting
you
down
need to spend
Russian
more
drones
defense?
or jets
Because if you have a dictator
over
willing
Ukrainian
to sacrifice
or
1 million people
Belarus,
in the war in Ukraine, this year only gaining very incremental successes in the Donbass, I think below 1% or 0.5% of territory.
There is a chance
if you're
World
willing
War
to do
III
that, you have to be sure that you are well prepared for that guy if he moves against NATO. If he would do
right
that,
now.
I don't know whether he will, but if he would, that we are prepared. That is why we are doing it, and he is spending 40% of the state budget on defense. So we take it seriously, but we are very well trained and prepared, and that is why I think we can afford to look at all of this with some calm and some determination.
All right, final question, the woman standing in front of the cameras.
Thank you, Ms. Zoe Ford for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. An Australian high-tech surveillance aircraft has just wrapped up a 3-month mission, including to assist with Eastern Sentry. How important has it been to have that aircraft as part of your efforts there? And would you like to see more effort, more contributions from Australia and the Asia-Pacific?
Well, let's be absolutely clear on this. Australia and New Zealand and Japan and South Korea, the Republic of Korea, we work very closely together with them. In NATO parlor, the IP4, the Indo-Pacific 4. And you know why? Because we acknowledge that the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific cannot be seen as two separate theaters. They are combined with North Korea and China supporting Russia's war effort, Iran supporting Russia's war effort. Let's not be naive about this. And we know that, as I said before, if China would do anything against Taiwan, most likely that Putin will be forced by Xi Jinping to move against NATO. So we have to stand ready, we have to work together, we have to train together, we have to procure
now that's
together.
An interesting connection
we have to make sure when it comes to intelligence, etc., etc. Not Article 5. You're not going to extend Article 5 to the Indo-Pacific. But this very practical cooperation is really crucial. And our
tensions heat up between Taiwan and China. China might push,
but also with New
Putin
Zealand, Japan, and
take on NATO and create
Shall we do one more question and then
a two-front war?
Okay, very good. We'll finish on the 4th row. Reuters.
That's something to think about.
Much. Sabine Siebold with Reuters. President Trump threatened to slap tariffs on Spain for refusing to meet the defense spending goal of 5%.
He's mad at
Is that
Spain.
justified in your opinion? And the second question, you were talking about the Pearl Initiative. President Zelensky was hoping to have reached commitments of 3.5 billion by now. You stand at 2 billion euros or dollars at the moment. There's quite a few NATO allies who haven't joined up to the initiative. What's your message to these allies?
When it comes to Pearl, I'm really confident that we have the support from allies to buy from what the Americans can provide in lethal and non-lethal aid. So the 6 nations are mentioned, Germany, Canada, Netherlands, and Sweden, Denmark, Norway. They provided the first 2 billion. And as I said today, nation after nation.
I've got some stats here we'll
some
get
of these
into
commitments
on
we expected because I know
military
a lot
support
myself and
by
others
Europe and US
to discuss this with
comparatively,
nations and explain why this
they're
is so
kinda
important. But
interesting.
also,
We've
some
seen
come up
some big
today
changes
saying, hey,
in the
we
last
are
few
going to
months.
sign up. So now we are over half. And that means that I'm really confident that the stream of defensive support from the US, the equipment they can deliver, lethal, non-lethal, that we can make sure that the bills will be paid by allies. On the first question, President Trump has been extremely important to make the NATO summit into a success. I've said before, without him, we would never have come to this outcome of 5%, including the 3.5%.
He has to keep flattering Trump, even though he's getting screwed by him.
That without Trump being president of the United States, we would have gotten there. I think that's extreme naivety. It is really thanks to him that we did. And for 2 reasons, because we have to reach the capability targets, and we need them to, if Article 5 is triggered, that we can do whatever we need to do to fight off the adversary attacking us, if it is Russia or terrorism or whatever.
Basically, how casually they talk now about Article 5 being invoked,
so
almost
really
as if it's inevitable. That's where we get
the good thing is that
we get in the
we had
game.
unanimity. All 32 total
Article 5 is invoked. That means all NATO countries come to the defense of, let's say, Poland. If Poland's attacked
I think
by
that is
Putin,
important.
which he already has been. He's been
Thank you
violating
so much.
airspace.
Now we have to prepare
18 drones
for
over
the
the airspace
Ukraine
just
defense
recently.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
They had to be shot down. Well, anyway, let's move on to some numbers. have some numbers to talk about on what's going on over there in Europe. And it's pretty dramatic, actually, when you look at the actual stats here. This is from the Kiel Institute, which is widely regarded as pretty accurate on what's going on with military support for Ukraine. And there you have it. I mean, look at that orange and look at that blue. On the left side, that bar that's about half orange, half blue is where we were in terms of European military support for Ukraine, which is the blue, and United States, which is the orange, about half and half. I mean, that's always been a big lie that we did most of the support. It was about half and half between us and European nations, going all the way back to 2022 when this all started. And in the middle there, that bar is what has changed since January 2025, when Donald Trump took office. And there are the numbers. Our contribution to the military aid to Ukraine has dropped so much you can almost barely see it on that bar graph, compared to the one on the left, which was before Trump. What we're looking at is a 43% drop in U.S. military support for Ukraine. And that's the numbers. And all the talk aside about being disappointed in Putin or praise for Ukraine, that's the backdrop of the meeting that's coming up between Trump and Zelensky on Friday. Zelensky's trying to reverse that trend. So is NATO. But we've just not seen anything from Trump suggesting that that's going to change. Meanwhile, take a look at this. Sweden's getting so worried.
7 million euros to upgrade its
They're building up their bomb
shelters
shelters
during the Second World War
in
and the
anticipation
Cold
of a
War,
Russian
like this one
invasion.
in
You know,
Sweden's
we laugh
capital,
about that here in the
Stockholm.
U.S.
Illegal dams, car
They're
park
taking
seems
it
like an
seriously,
ordinary
particularly those
underground
countries
parking area
that
carved
border
into the rock
Russia
face,
or
but
close
it
to
can
it.
actually also serve as a
They're
public shelter for
they're
1.2
preparing
thousand
for a
people.
Russian invasion of Western Europe.
Resist the blast,
the parts of
and
Eastern Europe it doesn't control.
the debris and such things that comes with a bomb. And then it's airtight, so it even resists biogas or chemical gas or even nuclear waste.
With tensions with Russia increasing since the full-scale war in Ukraine, the Swedish government has promised to increase its civil defense budget by 7 times. But Johannesson says the money allocated is unlikely to cover the cost of fixing all of the shelters, let alone
This is
building
Euro
new
News,
ones.
the
Sweden civil
news
defense
agency
minister
of the
warned last year
European
that a
Union.
military attack could not be ruled out.
French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu is walking a political tightrope this week. Just as a reminder, he had resigned just a few weeks after
that's
taking
our
office,
coverage of
and then was immediately
what might be
reappointed
the-
on Friday night
the
by
opening
French
of
President
World
Emmanuel
War
Macron
III. I
in
don't know.
a shocking and frankly
but Europe
puzzling
is-
move. But now,
is
with his new
seriously
government hanging by a thread, Lecornu decided on a
taking
bold move.
Putin's actions over there. And I don't blame them. I don't think we're taking it so seriously over here. But I don't think we really understand the true madness of Putin. I think we tend to think he's some sort of rational actor sometimes, and that just isn't the case. More to come, I'm sure. This has been Trail Mix live stream. Craig Crawford hosting, retired journalist working for nothing but the truth and Social Security check.